Hello, this is Eric Bobrow, and in this ArchiCAD video tutorial, I'll show you how to use the label tool in some creative ways that you may not have thought about. The label tool has the option of working with symbols, or basically scripted objects, that can display information about elements such as furniture or equipment on the floor plan, or windows or doors that you might want to annotate or label on an elevation or a section. So let's see how this works. Here I have a small building with just a few pieces of furniture and some windows that are already dimensioned or marked on the plan. Now, if I would like to identify the furniture, I can go to the label tool and simply click to create a text label here and indicate perhaps that it's a chair or perhaps a code number for the chair that would show up in a schedule. So I've just said right now that this is CH1 for the chair. Now, the limitation here is that I have to do this manually. I have to remember the right name or number of it. And if I did move this chair or delete it, then nothing happens to the marker. It actually sits there. So it's not linked to the information. So let's see, if I select the chair here, a similar one, and I scroll over in the info box, you'll see that there's an option to label elements. So I can associate a label with an element. Now when I do this initially, by clicking here, you'll see an arrow show up. This is just a type of label that hasn't been set up in a very useful fashion. If I select this label, I can go ahead and type in something. So for example, I could go in and type in a similar information here, but that doesn't really help us very much. I can also go and adjust the position of the leader line. But really, aside from the fact that if I move this chair to a new position or delete it and have the label move with it, there's no real advantage. Now, here's where we can go a little bit further. I can, let's just say, put this label back to the default settings that I've just added and open up the settings for that label. So I'll go and actually make sure that I'm selecting just the label, and then open up the label settings. Now, right now we're using text as the main option for the label, so I'm manually typing it in, but you'll notice when I press down on this pop-up menu that I can put in other information. And for example, I could just put in the ID, and when I say OK, it's going to display that ID. That can work in an interesting way, because if I then select the chair and go into its ID settings here, and I put in something like that CH-1, then that ID is going to update. And if I do move the chair or delete it, then that label is attached. Now, if I didn't want the actual leader line, I could go and bring the lines closer together and eventually perhaps remove it entirely if I move these points very carefully along. There are some options that you could use in that fashion, but that's really not very elegant. So let's take a look at another way that we can do this. So I'll just undo back all of these steps here, and let's just say that I want to work with the more sophisticated symbol type of label. So I'll select the label, open up its settings, and instead of picking text or ID, I can go down to one of the symbol options here. So these are objects that are scripted that are specifically for label use. You'll see a few that are provided by CAD Image. If you purchase some of their tools, they use this capability in a very clever way. But built into the standard ArchiCAD library is the object indicator here. This is one in the US library, but if you're in a different version of ArchiCAD, you'll probably find something similar. When I select that, you'll see, oh, there's the ID, and it has a little lozenge shape around it, which is quite attractive. I can say OK, and you can see that now it leaves out the leader line, and as before, it's going to display whatever the ID is for the object. So if I change this ID to something like the CH-1, then that object will be labeled appropriately. Now the symbol here can be dragged into position perhaps off to the side where it would read better. Now, suppose I wanted to label other elements in an even more automated fashion. I can go into the label tool in the default settings and look at the settings for the object tool. This will allow me to set up how objects will be labeled when I tell it ArchiCAD to label them. So instead of using text or ID, I'm going to pick that object indicator NCS 15 that I have here and say OK. And what that will do is, now that I have done that, if I select these two tables, and let's say that I put in something useful for their ID, perhaps I'll just call them TB-1. When I click on the label elements, you'll see that they instantly get labeled properly. So I've set up the default for labeling objects to use this object, this symbol label, and it will automatically pick up the ID from those objects. So that's very convenient. If you do have a schedule that you create of equipment, furniture, plumbing, whatever, you can have the information that would show up on the schedule also show up in the on that label that is associated with it. Now let's look at how we can apply this to the these windows in elevation. So you can see these windows have been numbered. They're not numbered sequentially, they've been numbered sort of randomly, and I'm going to demonstrate how you can renumber them quickly a little later on. But let's just take a look. We're going to look at the east elevation, which is the right side of the building as we're looking at the plan. And you'll see that we have 3 windows there, but we have no markers. Now, the windows on the plan are set up with dimension marker. If I select a window like this one, number 10, you'll see that there is an option here for different types of markers. Perhaps you have ones that show builder dimensions, and that would show, instead of a number, it'll show a dimension or sizing. Or you could say no marker. And so each one of these windows can have its own style, and this applies to doors just as well. Well, the standard window marker that we're using here is this one that I've selected, and I would like to have a similar marker in the elevation. Now, even though it's turned on here, it doesn't show up in the elevation. How can I get something that looks like this in the elevation and is attached to the window so it updates automatically? Well, let me go to the elevation here, and I'll select the window, and guess what? I'm going to use the option in the info box to label the element. And similar to what we had before, it will come up with just a simple arrow and a blank text. Now, I don't want to have to type in the number, and I don't want to have to deal with the arrow. So again, I'll select the label and open up its settings and change it from text to the one, let's say, for window markers it's built in to, in this case, the US library. Now, it's a circle instead of a diamond, but you'll notice that there are some options here in the label selection settings for controlling the look of the symbol. So, for example, I can go into the options little setup and change it from circle to rectangle. Now, I really want a diamond shape, but it turns out a rectangle, when it's rotated 45 degrees, looks like a diamond. In fact, if I want to, I can pick other options like hexagon. And when you see hexagon, we might want to actually rotate it. So there's a little parameter here. If I type in a 1 instead of a 0, it'll rotate it around, one division, and you can see the difference there. If I put it back to the square option, or the rectangle, you'll see that now it's rotated to be flat, and I actually might prefer to have it saying 0, so that it's going to be in a diamond orientation. Now, it does have an option here to show the ID, so even though it's not showing it in the preview, it will display that on screen. Let me click OK, and let's see what it does. There's the window with the number 10 in a diamond. So we're most of the way there. It's obviously picked up the information from that window that it was number 10, but the diamond is a little large and it's set off to the side. So let's see if we can get the sizing to match what we have on the plan. Let's go back to the plan, and let me copy this. Now, when I select the dimension marker here, it also selects the window, and if I try to copy it using the edit copy command, it will give a little warning sound saying it has not copied. It actually is not able to copy a window. You can copy a wall with a window in it, but you can't copy the window. Now what I'm going to do instead as a workaround is to go to the Edit menu and explode. So I go Edit, Reshape, Explode into Current View. And one of the options here is to keep the original elements too. So that means that I'm still going to have the window with its marker, but I'll also have a copy of it that is just pure graphics, line work. So I say OK. Now I'd like to move this over to the side. So if I just drag it over here, well, nothing really happened. I just moved the window sideways because it still had the window selected. So I'll undo that. What I'd like to do is select just the line work. Now if I use the arrow tool and draw a box around it, you may think that it's selected the window and the line work, but in fact ArchiCAD does not select a window using the arrow tool when you draw a selection rectangle. For example, if I do this off to the side here, you'll notice that it selects the wall. You can see the handles at the end of the wall, but not the window. What that means is if I do it in the area that I've just exploded, it's selecting all of the 2D graphics, but the wall is also selected, so I'll shift-click to deselect. And then I'll just drag this over to the side so I can see what I've got. So you can see now that there's a window still with the label dimension, and then there's a copy of the window just as graphics that I'm going to delete, and also a copy of the number here that is the dimension marker. So I'm going to cut this so it disappears but goes onto the clipboard, and then I'll go back to that elevation and I'm going to paste it in, and that will just give me a nice visual representation of what I had. So I'll paste it into the center of this view and then move it to a convenient location, and what we've now got is the exact size that this would need to be. So I can go and select the label here and resize it. After some experimentation, I found that the size that I needed to match that is 1/3 the size here, and the text settings also needed to be adjusted because they were too large, and I put it down to 4 points instead of 8. And that then gives me a marker that looks very similar. You can experiment on your own with what you would prefer to see on the elevation. Now you'll notice that this marker is off to the side of the window and that there's a handle or hotspot here. There's a distance between these that is set within the dialog box. In other words, if I open up the label settings, you'll see it says marker distance. And if I type in a 0, it will move this over right on top of that hotspot there. Now, having done that, I can go drag this. I can just use the drag command and move this into proper position. So I've now got a marker that is associated to this window. If I were to drag the window off to the side, it's going to move the marker as well. I'll just undo that. Now I want to label the other windows as well, and so what I'm going to do is go into the label tool and set them up. Unfortunately, I can't eyedrop this because that would actually change the default settings for normal labels, independent labels that are not attached to elements like windows, but I can manually go and pretty quickly recreate the settings that I've worked out. So I'll go pull down on the pop-up menu, say that I'd like to do it as the label window marker here, and open up the settings for the symbol label and change the size to the desired size, get rid of the marker distance, set that to 0, go in, change the polygon shape from circle to rectangle, and finally make the text the size that I need. So this would be 4 points for what is called details. The reason it's called details is that you could have something that has a detail number over a sheet number in this case. So in other words, there's going to be one number on top and one number on bottom. And the only one that matters for this purpose is just the one on top, because that's the only one that's used for showing the ID. So I've now changed the settings for Windows so that if I select Windows like this, these two, and I use the option in the info box to label them, that they will automatically get labeled in a nice, clean way. Now I can go ahead and select these two labels, and since these windows are similar size, I can just drag the two of them up and we'll just end up with them looking clean. If you did this on many different windows, and in fact I'll show you on, let's say, the south elevation here where we have 4 windows, I can simply select all windows. Now, be careful if you select all windows here. There are some windows that are in the sides of the building that are selected, and if I go and change that or use the labeled elements, it's going to label all of these. So you can see that the ones off to the side were labeled as well, which probably is not very useful. So I'll undo what I just did here, and I'll only do the windows that are on the actual face of the elevation. Now, I could manually select them, but I can also use the marquee tool to draw a box around the windows, switch to the window tool, and then use the select all windows in marquee. That's the command now available in the edit menu, or Command A or Control A, and then I can go in and label the elements, and then if I want to move those labels, I can click outside to deselect from the marquee, switch to the label tool, select all labels, just hit Command A or Control A, and then drag, and all of these can move up very, very quickly into position. If some of the windows are different sizes, then you may need to adjust these individually, but certainly this is a very quick way of getting them all labeled, and they are all associated. So again, if I select this window and I drag it here, it will move the label. If I select this window and delete it, it will delete that label as well. And if I go to the floor plan and do the usual thing, which where I might say take this window and drag it into a new position or change its size, let's go back to that elevation, and we'll see that, of course, the elevation updates, and that includes the marker. Now, the final part of this demonstration, I'm just going to do a quick repeat of the automatic numbering of windows that I did in a previous video tutorial. These windows are numbered sort of at random right now, and I'd like to get them in a sequence. So I will click on, or shift click to select one, and then continue to select one by one the windows, in this case going clockwise, in a sequence around the building. So I'm indicating to ArchiCAD that I'd like to select all of them, but I'm doing it one by one so that I can control the order that it knows I selected them. Having selected them in order, I can go to the Document menu, Schedules and Lists, and Element ID Manager, where I can choose to renumber all different sorts of elements, such as walls or doors. But notice that if it happens to be on the wrong one, such as doors, in the upper right it'll say I've got 9 elements selected, but 0 of them are configurable. You need to make sure you're set up for Windows, and now you can see it says 9 are selected and all of them are configurable. Having done that, I'm going to change the ID format, or go to the ID format, and we have various options. If I wanted to make them have a W for the first letter and then a number, I can do that. If I want to start it at a particular number, let's say we're on the second floor, and so I want to start it at window 21, I can do that. So whatever number I want to start it with, I can then click on Change IDs, and it will renumber them starting with that sequence. And if we look here, after it's done, you can see it's started from that first one, 21, 22, 23, etc. So very, very quick. And let's look at that south elevation, and we'll see the numbers have also updated. Now, the text, because I've added the W, now it's no longer fitting in there, so I might want to go back and change the settings for the dimension markers. You see they're a little bit tight there, and for the markers, the labels. So let's just see how we do that very, very quickly. I can go to the window tool. In this case, I can select all the windows. I don't need to use a marquee. And I can go open up the settings of the window tool, where we can see in the dimension marker panel, there's an option for the size of the marker. And this is expressed, in this case, in paper units, points or millimeters. I'll just type in a value that I think will work. But when we do the equivalent of the label one, for the elevations, what we'll need to do is to actually change the setting based on the real world size. So if I select, let's go to the label tool and just say select all labels. So I've just did Command A, open up the label here, and we'll go to the symbol label settings, and right now they're set at 1'4" in terms of real world size. I'll make it 1'9" here and say OK, and you can see how this updates, and now these are a convenient size for the text that's within them. If I want to have that be retained for the next time I put in windows, then I go to the label tool when nothing's selected and go back to the window tool here where I can set the defaults for the symbol labels for the next ones that I'm going to create, and that would then make it accommodate the new way of numbering. This has been Eric Bobrow, and this concludes my ArchiCAD video tutorial on symbol labels, which are a powerful tool for annotating your plans or elevations or sections with information based on the ID of the objects or windows or doors that you're referring to. I look forward to getting your comments and questions. You can post them on the page down below or send me a quick email to tips@bobrow.com. Thanks for watching.